Och i kölvattnet av slutoffensiven mot Mosul så förväntas ännu en stor flyktingvåg. Och med oss just nu via Skype har vi Donatella Rovera, Senior Crisis Response Advisor vid Amnesty International. Och Donatella är med oss via Skype. So, Donatella, you're one of the few who has actually been in Mosul after ISIS took control over the city 2 years ago. When was this?
I was last in Mosul at the end of June 2014, about 3 weeks after ISIS had taken control of Mosul.
So how would you describe the situation in the city when you were there?
Well, at the time, it wasn't as difficult as it is now because it was possible for residents to go in and out. And obviously, ISIS was not yet at that time focusing very much on ordinary people. They had their targets. So, for example, when I went in, they were going after people who were members of the security forces or who were working in some capacity with the government. So there were very long lines of men outside mosques waiting to do the sort of repentance speech, which was demanded by ISIS. Which was also, of course, a way of cataloging all the men who had been working with the security forces. The situation got progressively worse, and now people have been stuck in Mosul for well over a year and a half, not able to leave the town. Essentially, they're being held as human shields. Communication with residents inside Mosul is extremely difficult, and it's actually impossible quite a lot of the time. And even those communication that happen are mostly just kind of, people saying we're okay and not really able to discuss details of the situation. And obviously now with the military operation underway, there are many people in Mosul who are obviously terrified of what will happen.
What would you say is the biggest concerns regarding the civilians during this military operation?
There are two concerns, really. One is that this is the biggest anti-ISIS military operation that the Iraqi and the Kurdish forces have undertaken. Mosul is by far a bigger city than any of the other places they have recaptured. And so the impact on the civilian population is going to be huge. And there is the risk that people will be caught in the crossfire, that they will not be able to leave, on the one hand, because ISIS does not allow civilians to leave, and on the other hand, because there is no safe route that civilians know about. So if they want to escape, even if they manage to elude the surveillance of ISIS, they don't really know which way to go that will be safe for them. There are mines planted around ISIS-controlled area. And then the second risk is that even when civilians do manage to leave, we've seen in the past all over Iraq civilians who came out of ISIS-controlled area being subjected to terrible abuses by paramilitary forces and government forces. And also, last but not least, the fact that people will come out of Mosul, they will need assistance, they will be in a terrible situation, and the humanitarian assistance, there is a shortfall. The humanitarian actors are warning that they don't have the necessary funds to cover the humanitarian needs for such a large number of people.
So what would you say is the worst case scenario?
Well, obviously the worst case scenario has to be where large numbers of civilians are unable to flee and are caught in the crossfire. There are going to be multiple sides fighting against ISIS, so multiple fronts. There are airstrikes, so this is a terrifying prospect for the civilian population. And secondly, the possibility that when civilians come out, there is going to be a repetition of what we've seen in other places, where some of them are targeted and become the subject of revenge attacks by paramilitary militias and government forces who consider those who are living under ISIS control as being ISIS supporters, even though, as we know, the overwhelming majority do not support ISIS, but they found themselves to live in areas controlled by ISIS because they really don't have much other choice.
So, what kind of help do the civilians need when the Battle of Mosul is over?
Well, first of all, I'd say that the most critical period is when the Battle of Mosul is on, which is right now. The battle has started overnight. And so now and the coming days and weeks are the most dangerous times for the civilian population until they manage to get out of the line of fire. And then and in this period it is incumbent upon the forces that are conducting the military operation to make sure that they take all the possible precautions not to harm the civilians, and that they do everything that they can to provide some sort of safe routes for the civilians to be able to get out of Mosul, get out of the combat area safely. And when they do, they must be given the humanitarian assistance that they are going to need. I mean, I came back from Iraq only a few weeks ago, and I met people who had come out of places like Shargat and other places in Anbar, which had been recently retaken. And these were people who had walked sometime 30 hours or more, gone through areas which were full of mines, so risking their lives, walking for days without food, without water. So when they arrive, they're exhausted, they're scared. They've nothing because they were not able to carry anything. So they're going to need humanitarian assistance. And it's important that the international community, which has found the money for the war, must also find the funds for the consequences of the war, to make sure that the civilians who find themselves in this situation for no fault of their own, that they get the help and the assistance that they need, and above all, that they get the protection that they need.